Esteban Gutierrez was a rather humble yet quiet figure during his time in Formula 1 that by the time he had left the sport, I feel like very few cared or even realised that he had left F1. Having been a bit of a forgotten person in the current days, let us now go through what happened to Esteban Gutierrez. Gutierrez started karting back in 2004, and it would be 3 years before he would begin his proper racing career, where he would compete in the 2007 BMW Formula USA. He finished runner-up in the category, which was helped by his 4 race wins and 9 pole positions. He also made brief appearances in the ADAC version of BMW Formula. In 2008, Gutierrez would take part in the Europe edition of Formula BMW, and he would prove to be the top dog, as 7 wins for the season helped the Mexican to win the championship. He claimed a podium in 75% of all races. He again would make appearances in other championships such as in German Formula 3 and the International Formula Masters. He would then make the step up to the Formula 3 Euro Series in 2009, and while it was quite a struggle early on for him, Gutierrez would make improvements in the second half of the year as he scored 2 podiums and clawed his way to a top 10 finish in the standings, with 9th overall. He additionally competed in 4 events in the British Formula 3. In December 2009, Gutierrez would get his first exposure to a Formula 1 car as he tested BMW Sauber's car, which was his reward for winning the BMW Europe Championship back in 2008. His exposure to the team continued in 2010, where he would be included in the training regime and impressed so much in 2010 that by September he would be named as test and reserve driver. November 2010 saw Gutierrez take part in the young driver test and would go 4th fastest in the session, with some pretty big names in that session too, like Daniel Ricciardo for example. The turn of a decade would see Gutierrez again step up into GP3. This would be viewed by many as one of the best GP3 seasons ever, as his consistency was just magnificent, rarely missing out on the points and winning 5 races to go along with 9 total podiums. 88 points saw Gutierrez win the championship with ART, and his great performances were a major factor in him getting promoted into the test and reserve driver role at Sauber. Sporadic appearances in the British Formula 3 and Formula 3 Euro Series ensued as well for the Mexican. Promotion into GP2 presented itself to Gutierrez in 2011, and he would be outshadowed by teammate Jules Bianchi. He would finish outside of the points on most occasions, but out of the 4 occasions where Gutierrez scored points, 2 of them would be for podium finishes in sprint races, with a victory claimed at Valencia. A tough rookie season in GP2 overall saw Gutierrez settle for P13 in the championship on 15 points, whilst Bianchi managed a top 3 finish in the standings in the same Lotus ART. Before this GP2 season started, he came 11th overall in the 2011 GP2 Asia in an unmemorable season. Once again with Lotus in the GP2 season in 2012, Gutierrez made rapid improvements on 2011 efforts, scoring 3 podiums in the opening 4 races, which included 2 second-place finishes. Consistent points finishes would continue until the midway point, where the championship contender made a real statement, scoring victories in 2 out of 3 outings, both at Valencia and Silverstone feature races. 1 more win and an extra podium saw Gutierrez finish a very solid 3rd with 176 points. If there were to be any criticisms from the season, it would only be that he could not attain a single pole position, but he definitely showed brilliant racecraft. On his 3rd year of being test and reserve driver for Sauber, he would participate in FP1 for the 2012 Indian Grand Prix, replacing compatriot Sergio Perez, who was sick. Gutierrez would attain his opportunity to drive in F1 in 2013, where he signed on to become Sauber's first team driver, teaming up with Nico Hülkenberg. It would be an absolute struggle for Gutierrez to begin with, as although he may have had a few 11th and 12th place finishes, he wasn't able to crack into the points for most of the season. In contrast, Hülkenberg was doing an excellent job of scoring points on a regular basis. Some improvement would come the way of Gutierrez, as he would make Q3 in 3 of the final 7 events, and he did score an impressive 7th place finish at the Japanese Grand Prix. That would be his only points finish in 2013, as the Mexican driver would lay 16th overall at season's end on 6 points. Not only was he dominated by the Hulk in points scored, but qualifying was the same, where Hulkenberg had an average starting position of 9.89 against Gutierrez's 15.68. However, he did set a fastest lap in a race at Spain, which made him at the time the second youngest person ever to achieve this. If 2013 was disappointing overall for Gutierrez, then 2014 would be a disastrous year, but not necessarily in terms of the head-to-head battle against new teammate Adrian Sutil. It really looked like the car was just not up to it, as Gutierrez once again was rail against it, finishing regularly well outside the points. In fact, the best finish Gutierrez had was a 12th place finish at the opening Grand Prix in Australia, so it just goes to show that results basically got slowly worse as the season went on. To be honest, the most memorable moment featuring Gutierrez was probably when he got flipped over by Lord Maldonado himself. Gutierrez got no points, but in terms of the Sauber head-to-head battle, it was close. Neither scored points as Sauber suffered the most retirements of any outfit, and Sutil narrowly was up on Crowley 10-9. Sauber dropped both Gutierrez and Sutil at the end of 2014 for Marcus Ericsson and Felipe Nasser. Ferrari would be the ones to pick up Gutierrez and sign him on as their test driver for the 2015 season. He mentioned that taking the role was the biggest risk he took in his life, but as newcomers Haas had an alliance with Ferrari, the gamble paid off for Gutierrez as he was signed on as one of their inaugural drivers along with Romain Grosjean. 2016 had a lot of 2013 vibes about it, as Gutierrez was again to be outclassed by a superior teammate. This was especially the case in the opening two races, where Grosjean amassed a total of 18 points, while Gutierrez had 2 retirements, including in Australia, where he was involved in that scary Alonso shunt. It was ultimately to be a season of coming very close to points, but never quite doing enough for any top 10 finish, particularly that he had 5 11th place finishes. The Mexican for a second season went without scoring a point, looking not so good against Grosjean, who scored 29 points. Though other stats showed that Gutierrez was more honourable, like only losing 12-9 in the quali head-to-head and actually outracing Grosjean on Sunday's 7-6 when both cars finished. Gutierrez was released at season's end and never came back into F1. So what happened to Esteban Gutierrez after Formula 1? He would move into Formula E for a quarter of a season and achieved a best finish of 8th at the Monaco Grand Prix. A move into IndyCars was next on the cards. He sadly couldn't establish any real form in the 7 events he took part in and had left the competition before the season ended. A return to Formula 1 of sorts would become reality as Gutierrez made his return in the paddock in 2018. This time as Mercedes development driver, where he predominantly did work on the simulator. He had eventually been upgraded to reserve driver for both the Formula 1 and Formula E teams. However, it was found out in 2020 that Gutierrez was meant to replace Sergio Perez when he had tested positive for COVID, but Gutierrez had no longer qualified for his super license. This was because a new rule was introduced that you must have done a test covering at least 300 kilometers if you haven't competed in F1 in the last 3 years. Of course, Gutierrez had indeed last raced in F1 in 2016. And now in 2021, Gutierrez has been given a new role in the Mercedes setup, where he is now their brand and business ambassador, where he continues to build and maintain partnerships on the corporate side of things, particularly as he looks to specifically increase brand awareness and market share in Latin America. Don't worry though, he still very well knows how to drive, doing some demos recently. And thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Esteban Gutierrez and his time in Formula 1. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and follow me on my socials, where I have finally created an Instagram account.